You reap what you sow. Everyone must take responsibility for their actions. If you don't want to cause disaster, you must always consider whether your words and actions are appropriate and if they might hurt others. Think carefully before you act, rather than acting on impulse. This principle is very true in today's case. Let's delve into what really happened in this case. Welcome to Crime Documentary Files. On the evening of September 4, 2011, the quiet town of Lianyungang, Jiangsu Province, was disrupted by the roar of several police cars speeding through. Lianyungang, nestled in a serene mountainous region to the southwest, is typically very peaceful, so any disturbance in town quickly spreads like wildfire. That night, a massacre truly took place. To be precise, 2 families were murdered. 7 bodies, but a total of 9 lives were found at the scene, as one of the victims was pregnant with twins. The police arrived at the crime scene via the rugged mountain roads. Wang Juhai, the nephew of the deceased Wang Qingtian, quickly explained the situation. Wang Juhai told the police that his uncle, Wang Qingtian, and the neighbor, Li Xiaozhong, worked at the same construction site as him. On September 4th, Wang Juhai did not see either of them at the site, which was unusual since they would typically notify if they were to be absent. Sensing something was wrong, Wang Juhai called his uncle Wang Qingtian's cell phone after work around 7 p.m. He called multiple times, but no one answered. He also tried the landline, but again, no response. Growing more concerned, Wang Juhai shared the situation with his father. The two grabbed flashlights and headed to Wang Qingtian's house to check on him. They found the door locked, so they went next door to Li Xiaozhong's house. The Li's home, typical of the countryside, had 2 rows of houses. However, they found the door tightly shut and the yard silent. Peering through a crack, Wang Juhai saw the yard was dark. Given the close relationship between Wang Qingtian and Li Xiaozhong, Wang Juhai's father guessed they might have gone drinking together. The father and son continued asking around the village, but no one had seen Wang Qingtian or Li Xiaozhong all day. After wandering the village for a while, they decided to return to Mr. Wang's house. Upon hearing about Wang Qingtian's disappearance, 2 more relatives came to check on the situation. Under these circumstances, Wang Juhai decided to climb over the wall to see what was happening. As soon as he entered the yard, he smelled blood. Pulling back the curtain of the front room, he saw his aunt lying on her back, seemingly no longer breathing. Shocked, Wang Juhai immediately called his father and 2 relatives, informing them that someone was dead. The 3 outside broke the yard's lock and rushed to the scene. Some bodies lay outside the living room door, while others were inside the room. Seeing the state of Mr. Wang Qingtian and Li Xiaozhong, Wang Juhai quickly called the police and emergency services to the scene. The police identified a total of 7 victims, including 2 neighboring families. The oldest victim was 72 years old, and the youngest was just 6. 4 bodies were found at Wang Qingtian's house, including Wang Qingtian and his neighbor, Li Xiaozhong, who were found dead outside the living room near the front door. Wang Qingtian's 6-year-old niece and his wife were found dead in the front room. At Li Xiaozhong's house, police discovered 3 bodies: Li Xiaozhong's 72-year-old mother, his wife, and his stepdaughter from his previous marriage, who was pregnant with twins. Preliminary investigations confirmed that all victims died from deep wounds and acute blood loss. The weapon was identified as a sharp object, such as a knife. The time of death and the method of the attack were similar, indicating a single perpetrator. The scene was horrific. The victims' wounds were concentrated on their abdomens and backs. Each body had multiple stab wounds, and in some cases, the incisions were so deep that internal organs were exposed. Blood spattered everywhere from inside the house to the yard. However, the police noticed something peculiar. After committing the crime, the perpetrator seemed to have stayed at Wang Qingtian's house. Besides the blood spatters, the bloodstains around the bodies in Wang Qingtian's house showed signs of being wiped clean. In the bathroom, they found a blood-stained rag in a bucket of water, suggesting the killer had cleaned up after the murders. Moreover, the kitchen showed signs of use. There was leftover food on the table, as if it had been set out for the family. This indicated that the killer remained calm after committing the murders, staying to wash up and eat before locking the doors of both houses. Despite this, the perpetrator left numerous clues and evidence behind. DNA and fingerprints found at the scene would surely lead to the killer's capture soon. While waiting for test results, the police formed an investigative team to gather information from the neighbors and relatives of the Wang and Li families. Based on Wang Juhai's information, he suspected the killer might be his cousin Wang Qiaotang's close friend, Zheng Liu. Wang Juhai was certain of this, because Wang Qiaotang had taken his wife while Zheng Liu was in prison for grave robbing. Over time, Wang Juhai frequently asked the family about Zheng Liu's whereabouts. Although Zheng Liu had never harmed Wang Qingtian's family, he was the only one with a clear motive. Before he could say more, someone interrupted, asserting that the culprit might be a thug named Chen Du. The voice came from behind, and the police turned to see Mrs. Zhao, a neighbor of the Wang and Li families. Mrs. Zhao revealed that Li Xiaozhong's youngest son and son-in-law owed a huge amount of money. Because of this, the son-in-law had left his pregnant wife with Mr. Li's family. The two men had borrowed a large sum to invest but failed, and the accumulating interest became unmanageable. They moved to a bigger town to earn money, but their debt remained unpaid, leading the thugs to repeatedly visit Li Xiaozhong's house for payment. The thugs wanted to seize Mr. Li's house to settle the debt, but Mr. Li refused. Chen Du, the most aggressive thug, had visited Li Xiaozhong's house many times. Despite knowing Mr. Li's daughter was pregnant, he threatened to harm her if the debt was not paid. The conflicts often escalated to violence, with the Li family always on the losing side. Thus far, the two main suspects based on information from the victim's acquaintances were Chen Du and Zheng Liu. Just as the police prepared to investigate the suspects, the real perpetrator turned himself in. Later that same evening, a man walked into the police station. He identified himself as Zheng Liu and confessed to the murders. The account given by this man matched the situation of the Wang and Li families exactly. According to him, he didn't just kill one person, but two entire families. They were neighbors, and he killed 7 people in total. There was no doubt that Zheng Liu was the perpetrator of this mass murder. However, to avoid false confessions or covering up for another criminal, the police had to conduct a thorough investigation. So, what drove Zheng Liu to commit such a massacre? It was known that Zheng Liu had a very close relationship with Wang Qingtian's son, Wang Qiaotang. They were sworn brothers, extremely close. But while Zheng Liu was in prison, Wang Qiaotang had an affair with his wife, Xiao Xia, which enraged Zheng Liu. Zheng Liu was born in Guanyun County. His family was very poor, so he couldn't continue his education beyond elementary school. After finishing elementary school, Zheng Liu dropped out because he couldn't afford to continue his studies. Instead of helping his parents with farming or learning a trade, Zheng Liu wandered around the village every day and became a literal street vagabond. Though he could have worked to earn money, he still relied on his parents for support. He was mocked and became a negative example for the villagers. As time passed, and under the pressure of the villagers' taunts, he began to feel ashamed of himself. He told his parents that he wanted to work. His parents were overjoyed, thinking their son had finally matured and was ready to share the family burden. Little did they know that his so-called part-time job was actually illegal. Zheng Liu was accustomed to a lazy life, so working diligently was out of the question. He began making money through petty theft. Initially, his parents hoped he would send some money home, but they eventually abandoned this hope. They were just grateful he no longer asked them for money. Zheng Liu, on the other hand, didn't care about the future and lived day to day. By 2002, seeing that their son was of marriageable age, Zheng Liu's parents sought a matchmaker to help him find a wife. But Zheng Liu, who was still playful and living a wild, primitive lifestyle, refused all the matchmaker's suggestions. His parents were disappointed but didn't know what else to do. However, in May 2002, while wandering the streets, he encountered a woman being harassed by some young men. Normally, Zheng Liu was cowardly, but in the face of these wannabe tough guys, he decided to play the hero. The woman he saved was named Xiao Xia, also from a farming family in the same village as Zheng Liu. They quickly fell in love from their first meeting and soon got married. After getting married, Zheng Liu continued his so-called part-time job. Even his wife didn't know what he actually did, only that he left home late and returned in the middle of the night. By 2003, Zheng Liu met a man named Wang Qiaotang. They were considered colleagues as they both engaged in petty theft. They also shared a laziness and a love for drinking. It wasn't long before they became sworn brothers. Despite being married, Zheng Liu even enthusiastically invited Wang Qiaotang to his home. Over the next few years, the two began to develop their expertise and work together. Zheng Liu, being thin and small, was responsible for the thefts at night. Meanwhile, Wang Qiaotang was in charge of scouting locations and devising plans to deceive the victims, making it easier for the crew to act. They stole a lot of property together. Every time they succeeded, Zheng Liu would sell the stolen goods and bring the money home to his wife. Xiao always thought her husband was doing legitimate business outside and was happy to receive the money. In 2005, Wang Qiaotang and Zheng Liu nearly got caught while stealing from the home of a local official. That night, as usual, Wang Qiaotang scouted and selected the house to rob. He targeted Mr. Liang, a retired official, noticing many valuable items in the house. Additionally, the only residents were an elderly couple, making it an easy target. At 8 p.m., as Mr. Liang and his wife were preparing for bed, Wang Qiaotang and Zheng Liu broke into their house through the fence by the kitchen. Initially, they planned to wait inside until the lights went out, but Zheng Liu, eager, snuck inside before that. Just as Wang Qiaotang was about to join him, a man knocked at the front gate. He needed to pick up some important documents from Mr. Liang, who invited him into the living room to wait. At this point, Zheng Liu was hiding in the kitchen, worried that if someone came in for water, he would be discovered. Fortunately, after handing over the documents, Mr. Liang escorted the visitor out. Zheng Liu and Wang Qiaotang narrowly escaped that night. Over time, their desires grew. Ordinary thefts no longer satisfied their greed. Around this time, they heard about gold being found in ancient tombs, which caught Wang Qiaotang's interest. He shared the idea with Zheng Liu, and they decided to start grave robbing. In 2007, they heard of a recently discovered ancient tomb nearby and believed it contained priceless artifacts. They planned to exploit this opportunity. To ensure success, they scouted the area first and chose a dangerous path that would allow for a quick escape if they were discovered. The area was overgrown with weeds and had no clear paths, but they were undeterred by the promise of treasure. To avoid detection, they climbed up the mountain by hand, using the vines hanging down. Shortly after they began, Zheng Liu slipped and fell. Luckily, he was only slightly injured, with a sprained ankle. Seeing this, Wang Qiaotang abandoned the tomb robbing plan. He decided to take Zheng Liu back to his place and took care of him meticulously for 2 months until Zheng Liu recovered. This act deepened Zheng Liu's trust in Wang Qiaotang, whom he now saw as a brother. After resting for a while, they refused to give up and decided to try grave robbing again. This time, they received news from another location and rushed there with all their equipment. However, they were unaware that someone had reported them to the police. Upon realizing they had been exposed, they attacked the villagers, only to be surrounded by the police. The police found all kinds of grave-robbing tools in their possession, leaving them with no excuses. When the police took them back for interrogation, Zheng Liu suddenly claimed he had planned the entire theft and insisted that Wang Qiaotang was not involved. Zheng Liu took full responsibility, partly to repay Wang Qiaotang for saving his life, and partly because his wife, Xiao Xia, was pregnant. If both men went to prison, there would be no one to care for his wife and child. After several requests from Zheng Liu to take good care of his wife, Wang Qiaotang agreed without hesitation. Since Zheng Liu voluntarily turned himself in to the police, he was ultimately sentenced to 11 months in prison. While in jail, Wang Qiaotang occasionally visited Zheng Liu. Every time, Zheng Liu inquired about his wife and child. He felt relieved knowing they were doing well. During this time, Wang Qiaotang indeed took care of Xiao Xia, Zheng Liu's wife, as he had promised. However, over time, the two unexpectedly developed feelings for each other. Zheng Liu, who took the blame for Wang Qiaotang, was unaware that he was being betrayed by the two people he trusted the most. During this period, Zheng Liu always presented himself as a strong man who shouldered family responsibilities, while Wang Qiaotang, who was 7 years younger, was gentle and considerate toward Xiaoxia. They grew close within months of Zheng Liu being imprisoned. In the early months, his sworn brother and wife visited Zheng Liu regularly, but later, they seemed to forget about him entirely, never visiting him again. At first, Zheng Liu thought it was because Xiaoxia's pregnancy made it difficult for her to travel. But on the day he was released, Zheng Liu stepped out of the prison gate, looking around for someone familiar, only to find no one there. He had envisioned his wife holding their child and his brother waiting to greet him, but reality was a bitter disappointment. Without wasting time, Zheng Liu hurried home. Sadly, he was not welcomed by a joyous celebration or his wife's smiling face, but by a dusty house and a divorce agreement on the table. Zheng Liu was furious when he saw the letter and the divorce papers Xiaoxia had left for him. He never imagined that his life could change so dramatically in just 11 months. In the letter, Xiaoxia clearly stated the reason for the divorce. She and Wang Qiaotang had fallen in love and hoped Zheng Liu could give them his blessing. Zheng Liu couldn't believe what he was reading. He repeatedly called Xiaoxia and Wang Qiaotang, but they refused to answer, seemingly having agreed on this beforehand. With no idea where to find them, Zheng Liu went to Wang Qiaotang's parents' house. Wang Qingtian, Wang Qiaotang's father, confirmed that his son and Xiaoxia were living together. At this point, Zheng Liu remained rational and understood that Wang Qiaotang's actions were not his parents' fault. Mr. Wang Qingtian apologized sincerely, saying, "I'm truly sorry for what happened. I never thought my son would do this to you. I don't approve of them living together either." He also promised he would try to stop them from being together. Zheng Liu, seeing reason in Mr. Wang's words, asked him to inform him if Wang Qiaotang returned. From the time Zheng Liu was released until the Wang and Li families were massacred, Wang Qiaotang had been avoiding Zheng Liu for over 6 months. He didn't dare to face or answer calls from his sworn brother. It was as if Wang Qiaotang and Xiaoxia had vanished from the earth. Zheng Liu searched and inquired everywhere but to no avail, growing increasingly furious. The fire of revenge within him burned hotter and hotter. He swore that if he ever found the two of them, he would make them pay dearly for their betrayal. In November 2010, while Zheng Liu was tidying up his house, he suddenly heard a knock at the door. He opened it to find his wife, Xiaoxia, standing outside. Despite his anger, Zheng Liu was happy, thinking she had finally come to her senses and returned to him. However, he was shocked to learn that she was there to discuss their divorce. Hearing the word divorce, Zheng Liu became enraged and overturned the wooden table. He jumped up, ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife, aiming it at Xiaoxia. Seeing her husband's anger, Xiaoxia fell to her knees, begging for his forgiveness and asking him to agree to the divorce. Unable to control himself, Zheng Liu slashed her leg with the knife and then poked her eyes with chopsticks, causing her to scream in pain. At that moment, Wang Qiaotang, who had been waiting outside, rushed in upon hearing Xiaoxia's screams. Seeing the detestable couple embracing each other, Zheng Liu wanted to kill them both. But thinking about his child growing up without a mother, he managed to control himself and let them leave. Zheng Liu thought this would be the end of their issues. However, it was just the beginning of a haunting series of events. What drove Zheng Liu over the edge was when, at the end of 2010, he visited Wang Qiaotang's rented house to see his son and Xiaoxia. When he arrived, Wang Qiaotang was not there, but he saw women's clothes in the room. Since Wang Qiaotang was unmarried and involved with his wife, it was clear the clothes belonged to Xiaoxia. This sight pushed Zheng Liu's mental state further into turmoil, intensifying his desire for revenge against Wang Qiaotang. To warn Wang Qiaotang, Zheng Liu visited Wang Qingtian's house right after the 2011 Lunar New Year. He asked about Wang Qiaotang's whereabouts, even though he already knew where Qiaotang lived. Not getting the answer he wanted, Zheng Liu pulled out a knife and killed the Wang family's dog. Seeing the blood on his hands, Zheng Liu felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. Upon learning what Zheng Liu had done to his parents, Wang Qiaotang was furious, but Xiaoxia urged him to remain calm. Despite their affair being wrong, forgiving Zheng Liu repeatedly only emboldened him. Zheng Liu started lurking around Wang Xiaotang's rented house. By August 2011, Wang Xiaotang spoke to his father about finding a solution. Mr. Wang Qingtian, feeling helpless but concerned for his son, thought of the neighboring house. The Wang and Li families were neighbors, and most of the young men from the Li family had moved to the city for work, leaving only the wife and daughter at home. Thus, their house had a spare room. Mr. Wang approached Li Xiaozhong, asking if his son could stay there temporarily, and Li Xiaozhong agreed. After moving into Li Xiaozhong's house, Wang Qiaotang and Xiao Xia were extremely cautious. Wang Qiaotang only went out once or twice a week to buy necessary food and water. Meanwhile, Zheng Liu remained unaware, continuing to wait outside Wang Qiaotang's rented house, hoping to catch them. On September 3rd, Zheng Liu completely lost his patience. He broke into Wang Qiaotang's rented house but found no one there. Realizing he'd been tricked, he decided to sneak into the Wang family's yard and secretly cut the gas line to lure the two traitors out. He then sent a message to Wang Qiaotang and Xiao Xia, hoping to lure them to the scene of a gas leak. By this time, Wang Qiaotang and Xiao Xia had already left Li Xiaozhong's house to find another place to stay. However, as Zheng Liu entered the Wang family's yard, Li Xiaozhong's dog started barking loudly. Mr. and Mrs. Wang Qingtian noticed Zheng Liu and rushed out to stop him. But by then, Zheng Liu had lost his mind. He did not hesitate to attack and injure the couple and their granddaughter. Hearing the commotion, Li Xiaozhong ran over and was killed on the spot. Zheng Liu then went to Li's house and murdered Li Xiaozhong's wife, mother, and pregnant daughter. Tragically, Li Xiaozhong's daughter was pregnant with twins. Although Zheng Liu killed 7 people, the total death toll was 9, considering the unborn twins. After the murders, Zheng Liu did not leave immediately. He calmly cleaned up the crime scene, removing most of the bloodstains. He then stayed at Wang Qingtian's house, took a shower, and found some food to eat before leaving in the afternoon. Wang Juhai, Wang Qingtian, and Li Xiaozhong all worked at the same construction site. On September 4th, Wang Juhai became worried when he didn't see them. He knew his cousin was having an affair with someone else's wife, and the husband had caused trouble at the house multiple times. Finding the house locked, Wang Juhai felt uneasy, climbed over the wall, and discovered the massacre. As Wang Juhai called the police, Zheng Liu had already turned himself in at the district police station. Following the incident, city and provincial police in Jiangsu quickly formed an investigative team. The youngest victim in this tragedy was just 6 years old, and the oldest was 72. In December 2011, Zheng Liu was sentenced to death and stripped of his political rights for life. By September 2012, he was executed. The case was closed. Although Chinese criminal law considers surrendering a mitigating factor, Zheng Liu's crime was severe. He committed multiple murders out of revenge, targeting entire families and causing serious harm to society. Thus, leniency was not an option. For such severe intentional homicide cases, the punishment is typically the death penalty, life imprisonment, or a fixed-term imprisonment of over 10 years. After being tried by the Jiangsu Intermediate People's Court, Zheng Liu was sentenced to death and stripped of his political rights for life, as per the law. The massacre sparked numerous discussions locally. Some believed that Wang Qiaotang was indeed unethical for taking his brother's wife, blaming him for the tragedy. On the other hand, some felt that Zheng Liu's actions were extreme and foolish, driven by anger over an affair. They argued that violence does not solve problems, and that Zheng Liu might have received appropriate compensation if he had pursued a divorce on the grounds of infidelity. If Zheng Liu had remained calm, the tragic ending might have been avoided. Everyone involved had their reasons and faults, but the chosen outcome was tragically wrong. What do you think about today's case? Please leave a comment below. Thank you and see you in the next video on the Crime Documentary Files channel.